It is time for another Playful Humans podcast. I'm your host, Mike Montague, and my guest this week is John Schwenck. He's right there. We're going to be talking to him about his bike ride across the entire continent. That is crazy. But in the meantime, if you want to learn more about adventures less traveled, you can find his podcast there. You can go to adventures-less-traveled.com or find John Schwenck on Instagram, LinkedIn, and all that good stuff. You can find Playful Humans at playfulhumans.com and help rediscover the power of play with fun quizzes, cool people, lots of ideas to bring more fun to your work. Here we go.
Like the jingle.
All right. Yeah, we got to start with a good dance break, good jingle, John. And we got to start with the joke of the week. The joke of the week this week is brought to you by Deja Vu. The joke of the week this week is brought to you by Deja Vu. What do you call the wife of a hippie who lives in the South? That would be Mrs. Hippie. All right, not bad. Can you beat it?
Let's see. This one's from my grandpa. What do you call a deer with no eyes?
I don't know.
No idea. What do you call a deer with no eyes and no legs? Still no idea.
There you go. Those are new ones. I haven't heard that. But as always, great jokes to share with, I feel like anybody under 12 years old or anybody with a good sense of humor and a playful human. So, John, we should talk about that up front. I'm going to have to be honest. You're probably the least playful human I've had on the show in like 130 episodes here. You're a quantitative analysis in finance doing statistical modeling and machine learning. So we should probably ask people, why are you here? What was your big adventure that brought you here on the show?
Yeah. So I definitely whole different side of the brain. But in 2019, on April 15th, actually, so we're coming up on 4 years, I rode my dad's 30-year-old bicycle from Central Park in New York City, 5,775 miles over the course of 95 days, all the way to Seward, Alaska. And it rained. I used to remember the exact percentage, but I think it was like 73% of the time it was like torrential downpour. So it was brutal.
And you were taking weather data along the way. So you actually counted this. And
yeah. Oh, yeah.
You did not pick a good time of year. You picked a 30-year-old bicycle. And I also saw in your story, you didn't train a whole lot. It's not like you were a college cyclist and this was a lifelong dream. So I'm getting into the lessons learned. But let's first go back to like, why did you even decide to do this in the first place?
Yeah. So I get that a lot because, like you said, I think the most amount of miles I ever rode before I started on day one was like 15 maybe or 20. Or there was one weekend I rode from like Atlantic City back to my hometown, North Jersey, which is like 40 miles maybe. But yeah, so it kind of all started with grad school. So for the longest time, I wanted to go to grad school for statistics. And there was this research grant that it was through the National Science Foundation. And I was applying to that, but I realized like, I don't have anything really outstanding in my life to talk about in the sense of like, you know, there's so many people that apply for this grant. Like what would make me stand out? And then I went to, coincidentally, this was all happening in tandem. I went to the doctor just for like a routine checkup and they found this heart condition that I had. And that was kind of my bingo. Because they didn't really know much about it it's not that they didn't know much about it. It's just that for me, someone like myself, who's very generally athletic, like I'm a general, otherwise healthy individual. They were like very confused as to why I wasn't super lethargic and why I wasn't overweight and like all this other stuff, given this heart problem. So with that being said, the that was kind of the impetus for the whole thing. I'm like, oh, I can write about this because they don't have any data on it. And I granted it was a N of one kind of a pilot study, if you will, but uh that was what got the gears turning. I didn't end up getting the grant, but I was so far along at that point that I'm like, well, I'm not bagging out now. Like I'm already pot committed. So I guess I got to go through with this thing. I made a website, had all, hundreds of people following me and everything. So at that point I was like, all right, well, you know what? It's time. Like I'm ready to do this. And it at the end of the day, it was really about how far can I push myself? Because I really just wanted to I just wanted something to prove to myself that I can go way above and beyond what I thought was possible. And also just to get out there and really see the world for how it is and meet some of the people who are just salt of the earth. Every day, you and me, not the people you see on TV. So
Yeah.
that was kind of the reason. Yeah.
I love it for several reasons, and I want to dive into all of it. First, I have to award you 5 bonus points for get your gears turning metaphor you used in coming up with the idea. But second, this is what I love about it and why I wanted you on the show. Playful Humans is all about remembering to go outside and play and mix it up and improv and do some things that you're sure won't work, and
Yeah.
maybe a little anti-tech, but not necessarily. It's just like you don't need to measure your steps if you're riding a bike across the country. Like you're getting your exercise in that day, right? That there's some blatantly obvious stuff that if you want to be more social media is probably not the place to go. You got to go
Right.
actually talk to humans that you mentioned. So I love all of that, but I did want to ask you, as somebody who is into machine learning and statistical numbers, and that was a large part of your trip, how do you balance those two things? Do you think I kind of see them as two different tanks and I got to keep them both full? I need a little bit of both, and moving between the two is really interesting. But did you see this as a play activity, or did you see it as lifelong learning? And I'm sure you have insane amounts of flat tires and challenges that you run into that you can't plan for, you can't measure. Like this isn't a thing that you can easily control, right?
So it, it's interesting you said because for one thing, my dad, when he was 25, he went from New Jersey to California, and then my parents, and then when him and my mom met, and a couple years later, they tried to go to Alaska, but then I was born and I got in the way, stopped that whole trip. So it part of it was like, oh, I gotta finish their trip, but then the other part about having like the flat tires and the preparation, I disassembled that bike down to its frame every single day. I might not have rode that many miles. I might not have physically trained, which I probably should have, but I stripped that thing down to know exactly how to fix every single part of that so that because I'm like, I don't want to be stranded in Nebraska with no idea of how to fix my bike or have to rely on some guy who's going to charge me an arm and a leg to fix it. So I was super prepared, but I really thought of it as just a mission. Like I really wanted to just it was just something I wanted to prove to myself just to show like I can do this seemingly insurmountable feat. And then if I can do this when I go to grad school or when I go any other challenge in the rest of my life, I'm like, it's not that bad. I just rode my bike across North America. Right. So
I
but I
love that so much
yeah,
too, because
yeah,
I've talk about that in a lot of the stuff that I do, like performing on big stages or other things. And like once something goes wrong, either in a live broadcast or in front of like 12,000 people on stage, you become bulletproof as a performer because you're like, all right, well, nothing's going to be worse than that one gig I did
right.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
stuff. And I think there
Hit
is
the bar.
something to resilience when you push yourself like that it makes everything else easier, which is fun.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that was like, that's the one thing where like there were so many things that went wrong. I knew it wasn't going to be a joyride. I knew it wasn't going to be sunshines and rainbows, but I had no idea how like I totally discounted the weather. Like I thought, oh, it might rain a couple days here and there, but that was really like the torture. Like every day, all my stuff is moldy and mildewy, and like every day I'm like, I'm gonna either change my destination or give up. But just inch by inch, you just keep clawing your way to the real finish line, and
So
And
you
that's
did start in April showers and stuff here. If you had to do it again, what were some of the biggest lessons you learned? I don't know how many people listening will try and bike it, but I think when you're doing big things like this, you do learn an insane amount along the way. Uh, but technical stuff too, as well as the emotional stuff you've already talked about a little bit.
yeah. So logistically speaking, it was kind of an anomaly. Like it wasn't a normal year. It was insane weather. I mean, it was snowing. Like there was like 3 feet of snow in June. So like in wherever I was, in Nebraska,
Just got
Wyoming,
lucky. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So that's, I mean, obviously that's kind of unavoidable. That was like one of the big things I learned is like don't mess with Mother Nature, but prepare for it. But I think just don't look any farther than like 3 days out. If you start to look at the entire like how far you still have to go, it's going to be very discouraging very quickly. So even if you're thinking about doing a trip like a short trip, like a weekend or something, like don't, well, I guess a weekend is a couple days, but if you're thinking of doing like a multi-week trip, don't plan any farther than like 2 or 3 days in front of you because you don't know, you might get a burst of energy and go, do a century ride and over 100 miles, and then that totally messes up your plan. So keep that in mind, I guess.
And it took you 95 days, which actually doesn't sound that bad for almost 6,000 miles. Um, what, how off was that from where you started? And I guess you did this after school, right? So you didn't have to like take a sabbatical for 3 months, but it's a
No, so
significant
I was
period of
working.
time. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I was working for 3 years, but this was like the transition between my first job out of college and grad school, and I was like,
Cool.
well, I'm gonna go to I know I'm going to grad school. I got in, and I know I'm gonna leave this job, obviously. So I had the buffer time, but it was really funny you say that because my original goal was 5,800 miles in 100 days, and I was literally 25 miles off the mark. And like when I look at the original route I had, I'm like, it was pretty like pretty close. I mean, it wasn't yeah, it wasn't far off the mark, but
That is interesting, but tell me more about 95 days. You mentioned you had been working a while. What is it like as an adult to take a summer off or have 95 days when you weren't working? Were there anything that you noticed about? I'm sure you had to miss some holidays, and like, did it feel guilty or strange or proud the whole time, or all of the above? Tell me about that long
so
of a time committed to
um
something.
I'm assuming you're alluding to like the solitude of it. But so I am an only child, or I didn't grow up. I grew up. I'm an introvert naturally, so for me, like being at peace with myself is enjoyable. But um, it's fun. The Fourth of July that's like one of my favorite holidays. Like it's always been one where me and a bunch of my family friends, we all get together at this place in South Carolina. And, every year I look forward to that. I've been doing it since I was, a tiny little kid. Um, so naturally I was like, I wish I was there for the 4th of July, but specifically, I wish I was in the US for the 4th of July because it's one of my favorite holidays. And I was in Canada, and I know they say Canadians are like generally nice people. I think on top of like having the unlucky rain, I also had the unlucky Canadians who are like total pricks to me. So that I was like very anxious to get out of there at that time. But so I had like, I think it was like 200 miles, and it was normally going to be 2 days to break it over time to get into Alaska. And it was July 3rd, and I'm like, I'm getting out of here. So I literally rode the entire, I don't exactly remember the exact number, but I think it was close to like 200 miles straight. I think it was almost 18 hours or something. And I'm like, I finally made it. Like I'm in Alaska and can finally celebrate the 4th of July in the US. So, yeah.
And last one here about the trip, and then I want to ask you some more about just general philosophy and life stuff. But um, how did your body change over those 95 days? You mentioned you had been training a decent amount, but not crazy. it sounds like if you could do those 200 miles in a day, that's significantly different than where you started. But did you lose a bunch of weight? Did you find anything else done that, weird? What happened to your heart? That kind of stuff?
Yeah, I did find I lost a ton of weight as expected. I think I started the trip like either 195 or 200, and then by the end I was 160, I think. And then 2 weeks. So anyone thinking about doing a trip, it takes 2 weeks to get used to it.
Mm.
In the beginning, like one of the first couple days, like I had excruciatingly painful or excruciating pain in my knee, and what else? I broke my collarbone. I crashed a couple times. Like it was a mess. But after the 2 weeks, like you get into the rhythm and it's fine. Um, yeah. So
Uh, Now, I wanted to ask you specifically because, like I said, I don't normally have statistical analysis, quantitative analysis on this show. Um, what you think is the benefits of both? Like, how much measurement is a good amount of measurement, and how much, as a human, people should probably just be living their life? Because I think you have a unique perspective on this. For me, I'll just share a little bit, not to give away the answer. You don't have to agree at all, but I got rid of my Fitbit and stuff. I was like, why am I counting steps or measuring my sleep? Like, I've never like struggled to sleep at all in my life anyway. I can fall asleep anywhere. In my 20s, I could drink a Diet Mountain Dew and go to bed. Like, it didn't matter at all. And I just found, I was like, I'm over measuring stuff. And when I look at social media and I'm worrying about likes and counts or views rather than am I doing interesting things and connecting with people, I just end up going the wrong direction. So I would love your help and advice here on what makes, interesting data and helpful machines, computers analysis, and maybe where the line is when it starts to become hazardous.
well, I have the exact opposite worldview as you, I think, but I think a
That's great.
big problem with what happened in your scenario is you need people who can give you the right insight. So I think a lot of problems with these apps where all they're doing is collecting data is unless there's someone like me where you're actually going to take that data and run some kind of either analysis or some kind of model on it, it like it's useless. I mean, it's useless for the everyday person. So, but what I think would be very beneficial is if you had some kind of app where you can look at like trends over time and you can see um like it could throw you an alert if your blood. It's really helpful in the medical setting, and that's a lot of the research I did in grad school was looking at hypertension and diabetes. So like specifically with
Yeah.
diabetes, when their blood sugar goes too high, I mean they could die, and to I guess to a similar extent with hypertension. But so if you have an app where it lets you know like, oh, you've been eating a lot of sugar or you've been, your levels are off, like it can specifically tell you based off of learning your characteristics. And I think that's very beneficial. Generally speaking, my philosophy is just like um, radical transparency and in the data, like collect as much as you can and then try to find a way to analyze it. But obviously, not everyone's like me. So, but with that being said, I think I I think it's really I think people forget that humans are like very biased individuals, and
Mm.
to a flaw, like to a very bad flaw where y- it's like actually very frustrating for me when I hear people talk who are experts or people who are in a position of power and they're speaking and I'm like that is like just not right statistically, mathematically, logically, intuitively, like it's not correct. So but you can prove that if you just had data, right? So that's and something related to this podcast, I think. So there's a big issue about like return to work, right? So a lot of people are upset that uh, a lot of companies are forcing their employees back into the office, whereas in COVID, everyone forced them out of the office. So that's kind of shuffling them around like a bunch of sheep, right? But the the argument is that everyone bonds together when they're in the office. And the people who want to work remote are like, well, I'm just as productive when I'm in the office or not. And when I go in the office, I'm on a Zoom call. So how do you solve that debate? with data. Collect the data, see how productive people are in and out of the setting, and then you can compare and contrast and make an unbiased, unequivocal decision based off of what you're seeing. And it should be a case by case basis. It shouldn't be like people whose jobs rely on like tech workers, like, do they really need to go in because they don't have any face to face contact? But salesmen, I don't know. It
They don't
depends
like
on the
talking to people either.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
They
it
like to be
depends
heads
on
down on the computer.
yeah, yeah. And like those instances, it really just depends on the data. And I think that's like a really useful tool. So for me, I'm like analyze everything, measure everything, but I understand both sides of the coin.
That's interesting. And I'm glad you brought it up. I'm glad you felt comfortable sharing that and stuff, because I do think I go the other way. Now, I am a recovering computer nerd. So I was a programmer, and I built over 200 websites, and got like a 35 on my ACTs in math and science and stuff. But I feel like you're right on. I think it's all about how it's applied and whether it's useful to you. So I kind of heard two things there from my perspective. One is, I think the problem with the Fitbits and some of the stuff, the measurements that I don't like, is that like social media is a great example. We're giving all of our data to Facebook, and they're not giving any insights back to us. They're making our life worse with those. And so you're right. It would take somebody extraordinary effort to that. And so, Google's tracking our phone, and they're making their maps better and stuff. And sometimes that helps us, but most of the time we're not getting that value back out of it. And I think, I love what you said about the go to work too, is that people assume that two things can't be true at the same time, which is you might be more productive at home, and you might need better relationships at the office too. And so it could be that both things are true, or both things are false, that you're actually more productive at the office, and you reach out to coworkers at home more than you do when you're in the office, because you just shut your door and don't work
Yeah.
out. Like,
Well, and it also depends on like the team. I mean, within the same company, you could have like a team where all the team members are spread across the country. So they go in the office, they're just going to do the same thing that they did in the off in at home anyway. But then there's other ones where they need to collaborate, right? It's exactly to your point. So it's just the only way to get
yeah.
that.
Now here's where I'm going to bring it all together for us. I think whether you're trying to be a playful human, get out, be creative, and improv, or make yourself a fun, playful career, and do podcasts and you do fun things and stuff too. What I think I'm hearing is you should treat it like an experiment, right? Like, we actually need to test this. And so even if you are a more analytical person, you also have to say, sometimes we have to do things that we don't know they're going to work or not. I think where people get stuck is in the perfectionism. They want to measure stuff. They want to have everything perfect before they move. And that doesn't work either.
Yeah.
Is that a good place to meet in the middle for us?
Yeah. Yeah. As long as we're not stuck in our own echo chambers and we're open to other ideas, I think that's the middle ground.
Awesome. Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Tell us about your podcast, what you have going on. How can we help you, or how are you trying to help other people?
Yeah. So, like I mentioned, that it's going to be 4 years coming up on April 15th. So that's when the podcast is going to drop. It's gonna it's mostly pre-recorded, so I have enough episodes to get me through, our quote unquote first season. So there's essentially four pillars to the podcast. Adventure. If you think about it, adventure doesn't have a universal definition, right? So adventure is defined differently for different people. Now you have like start to finish adventures, like people like myself, where clear start and end point. Then you have these kind of career adventures where they're either extreme athletes or extreme adventurers, right? Like people who do like kayakers, skydivers, think like Red Bull athletes, like those kinds of people, right? And then you have researchers, so people who are forced to go on an adventure for their job. So, for example, I had one professor in Canada who set up. She does ice core research, so she has to literally climb to the top of the mountain, set up a camp, and start drilling ice cores at the top. Like that's
Awesome.
what she does for her job. And then the fourth pillar are people throughout history. So there's a lot of really exciting adventurers who have stories to share, but they're not alive to tell the tale. So these are more like the monologue segments, not necessarily interviews, but I'm hoping to make it an immersive thing. It's video format. My goal is to make it more than a podcast, but less than a documentary. So have like immersive video where you can for example, like ice climbing. Not many people know what ice climbing is. So I'll kind of layer in like different videos to show, or cave diving, for example, show like what it is and how it works, and give you a little bit extra flavor.
That's really cool. It's called Adventures Less Traveled. Check that out wherever you're listening to this podcast or watching this one right now. That'd probably be a good place to start. And you can always reach out to John Schwenck there on whatever social media is your favorite. Got Instagram, LinkedIn, all the good stuff there as well.
Instagram's good, and YouTube is the predominant channel for the videos. The audio is going to be everywhere else. So
yeah, that is great. Okay, now do you want to play a game?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. We surveyed 100 people, the top 5 answers on the board. So this is our data portion of the show, just for statistical analysis, very scientific. We asked 100 people to name a precious stone or gem. Which one do you think was the highest?
Diamond? Does that count?
Diamond's number 1 answer. You nailed it. Ruby, emerald, opal, and pearl also on the list. All right, question number 2. Based on how much you use it, what would you consider the greatest invention ever?
Mobile phone.
Phone. 1 answer. He's 2 for 2. Electricity, TV, car, and computer also on the list. Electricity would be a really good answer. Most don't even realize how much they're using it, though. All right, and last one. You already won, so this one's a freebie. But name a place where everyone stares if you come in late.
So since it's Family Feud, I'm going to say classroom.
Oh, good answer. It's number 5, but church number 1, business meeting number 2, work or wedding also in the top list there.
Church, that's an interesting one.
Nicely done. All right. Well, you win our game, which means we give you a free 30-second commercial here. You kind of already pitched your show and stuff, but what do you think? Anything else we need to know about Adventures Less Traveled, or how we can help you?
Subscribe. Let me know what you think. On my website, I'll have like a feedback form. As I've explained in this interview, I love data, so I love feedback and collecting insights.
I love that too, for sure. I don't want the feedback. I do want the loves and the likes and the shares. So please do that. And I want to connect with you. So reach out. Playfulhumans.com is the website. There's sponsors up there that you can visit. Cool products and things you can use to be more playful. There's a community. You can join other people. You can take a personality quiz. John, you'll like this one. 10 different personalities. We measure on a bunch of questions, completely unscientific, and name you with one of the playful personalities. Until next time, go play, everybody.
Don't wait for the